Alright, so this is the story of my psychedelic use and how it saved my life.
Once upon a time.
We have to go back to when I was 24, and at this period of my life, things were really starting to get, I guess you could say, interesting. Little backstory, I was basically a straight edge kid for most of my life. I maybe tried weed like once in high school, didn't really like it, wrote it off, and then basically just stuck to alcohol and hookah. I'm averaging about 1 drink a day every evening after I come home from work, at least for the hookah tobacco. Because I lived so close to work, I would actually come home on my lunch, smoke a bowl, go back to work, come home, smoke another bowl. At least 2 bowls a day. Sometimes 3 if I woke up early enough in the morning and I was able to just rip a bowl before heading on into the store. I was a pretty ignorant 24-year-old. I had that wannabe Wolf of Wall Street personality. Definitely a douchebag, very judgmental, not open-minded, really. You know, I was making good money in the auto industry. My grandfather had severe Alzheimer's and dementia, and at this time it was really starting to show and progress pretty quickly. My father had been battling prostate cancer that metastasized in different parts in his body since like 08 or 09. And so by the time 2018 rolled around, I was actually reconnecting with an old friend from college. We met in an English class at the University of Nevada, Reno. We were really close in college, kind of became like drifted apart a little bit, and then we ended up reconnecting again. She was a great person. So March rolls around and I have a really good month in the auto industry. I have a really good bonus coming my way, and we decided to book a vacation to Greece. I was going to pay for my half and she was going to pay for her half, and it was just going to be a nice little romantic getaway for both of us. Before the vacation, she was going to be coming out here to be my +1 for a wedding, and that November we were going to head on out to Greece. Summer 2018 rolls around before the wedding. I just started dabbling in Adderall. I was thinking the entire time, I was like, oh, I'm probably going to have to lie to go get a script. So I looked up all of the criteria, to qualify for ADHD. And turns out I actually didn't have to lie. I actually have ADHD. And then when I went in and I just told the guy, told the doctor, basically everything that was going on, he was just like, yeah, here's some Adderall. So genuinely have ADHD. I also started smoking weed a little bit too. Turns out I was just smoking some garbage stuff back in high school. So I actually got my hands on some really good stuff and I started liking it. Really kind of helped, just kind of ground me, I guess you could say, when I kind of started getting like really anxious or frantic or neurotic or something like that. Yeah, so over this period of time, my friend and I were getting a lot closer to each other, and I really don't want to go into crazy detail out of respect for her, but things just completely started falling apart. There was something that happened at the wedding that caused things to take a complete 180, and then all of a sudden we were talking about her moving out here to just absolutely nothing at all whatsoever. So that wasn't sitting right with me. I had a big like obsession with wanting to like control different aspects of my life, regardless of not whether I could or couldn't, or whether it was my place to or not. It's just like, it's not our job to control other people. It's our job to control ourselves. I was also, kind of spiraling at this point. The negative thoughts were extremely frequent. Actually, they were just every single day. And then I just had a thought one day. I was like, you know what? Let's just try cocaine. And the first time I tried it, I ended up getting a tainted batch, and it was cut with meth, and I was meth bombed. How do I know this? Because it felt like fire shooting straight up my nasal passages, through the sinus cavity, all the way down through the back of my throat. It was disgusting, it was awful, and I was wired all at the same time. I almost completely wrote it off, and I was just kind of like, well, why do people really like this? There must have been something wrong with what I had. I decided to try it again. I actually got good stuff, and I ended up liking it a little too much.
Bullshit! I love cocaine! I like when that stuff hits my brain and this thing goes!
When the day came for us to go to Greece, we were actually going to meet at Chicago O'Hare Airport, and when we met up in the terminal, she saw me, and just right away she knew something was not right. She saw that I lost a significant amount of weight. That was caused by the Adderall use and the decreased appetite, as well as the cocaine use. So stimulants have this thing where they will suppress your appetite. And then the bags under my eyes just screamed sleep deprivation. She made it clear that she really didn't want to talk about anything that happened with the situation, but again, I was very determined to not let things fall apart. So the very first night, I thought it was a good idea to tell her about, what happened in between that month, and how I started spiraling, and how I started using cocaine, And immediately, you could tell the vibe was completely different, completely like, what the fuck's wrong with you? She didn't say that, but I mean, that was the energy that I was definitely feeling. And if I remember correctly, I believe she took a course in college that, covered like drug addiction, drug use, stuff like that. That definitely wasn't helping. And I tried enjoying the trip as best as I could, but again, with this all going on in the back of my mind, plus all the stuff with my grandfather and my father, I was just not handling it all well. My energy was totally off throughout the entire trip. The plan was when we got back, she was going to crash with me for a day and then go back to Nevada the next day. So that's how the flight itinerary was all set up. As soon as we landed back at the airport and she got her bag, she went straight to the ticket counter, paid like an extra like 300 and something bucks. I think it was almost $400 actually, just to get a return flight within like a couple hours and just to get away from me. And this should have been just a massive red flag right there, but unfortunately it wasn't. And just seeing her pay that much money just to get away from me just really like hit in a different way. I mean, granted, given everything that was going on my end, I mean, kind of really don't blame her, especially if you're not trying to be around, that type of life. I get it. I'm not mad at her for it. But it just hurt. I remember dropping her off at the terminal and just completely losing it after we parted ways. I knew that would be the last time I would ever speak with her again. And actually, I'm not sure if this is just embarrassing, sad, both. I mean, big heartbreak thing. I mean, I let it get to me because, again, everything else that was going on, plus the drug use and whatnot. I remember there was one instance in particular that my brother came over and, he's my best friend. I call him my brother because we've known each other since we were little kids. And yeah, he's my brother. But he came over one day just to find me on the ground, like in the fetal position, just crying and losing it. There's going to be a lot of moments in this story that I'm not proud of. That's definitely one of them. Like I said, not sure if that's embarrassing or sad. But let's fast forward to 2019. One day, I overslept for a training class that I was supposed to go to on my day off. And my coworker actually came over, found my door open, and thought that I actually overdosed. Just want to put this out there for context. When it came to the drug use, I was very careful with the dosage. I was just doing it just very, very frequently. I was not determined to go out in the OD way. I would rather test the load-bearing capacity of my ceiling rafters after finding a good sail on rope instead. But they came over and I woke up to them like shaking me because they thought that I OD'd. That still wasn't enough to make me stop. I just chalked it up to, oh yeah, it was just a one-time, oversleep type of thing. Don't worry about it. My grandfather's Alzheimer's and dementia was getting worse. He was starting to forget basic things like locking the door, turning off the stove, his keys, things like that. It got so bad to the point where he ended up moving in with my aunt, and then my father, who was living with her, moved into my grandfather's place because he lived in a part of town that you did not want to leave a house abandoned, especially when it was full of a bunch of stuff, collected through decades, which we'll touch on later. My grandfather moved in with my aunt, and he had what's basically called like sundowners. He would get up in the middle of the night and want to cook something, or he would want to go visit an old friend that had passed away decades prior. But there was one experience in particular that tore me up. Again, drug use is in full swing at this point. Cocaine, Adderall, weed for sure. I'm experimenting with a bunch of other little things as well, which again, I'll touch on later. My father asked me to come over one evening to watch my grandfather. My dad and my aunt were basically taking shifts to watch him, and my aunt was actually out on vacation, so he asked me to go over. Great, no problem. I had no problem with the task, especially when you have stimulants in your tool belt, because you'll have no problem staying up. If you know, you know. But I remember a couple times where my grandfather got up, I would just gently talk him back down into bed, go back out to my computer, hit my little bullet of cocaine, and then the third time that he got up, that's the experience that really tore me up. He wasn't really responding well when I was trying to gently calm him down to get him back into bed. He was just very determined to get out of the house. It was kind of obvious that he had no idea where he was. And then my father, who was sleeping in the next room, heard all of this. He got up, came over, and my grandfather started getting a little spooked because he had no idea who my father was. And again, he just started getting all freaked out. So I told him, I was like, Dad, I need you to, leave real quick. Let me just continue trying to, calmly talk talked to him. He left. I don't know what made me ask. I really wish I didn't, because as soon as I did, it just felt like a bunch of just daggers piercing my chest. I asked him if he knew who I was, and he said no. That was an emotion that I never experienced before. That was a type of hurt and a type of pain that I had never experienced before. I was able to calmly get him back into bed. I was able to keep myself together. You know, when I'm in that caregiving mode, like, I am able to separate, if that makes sense. But as soon as I walked out to the dining room to go see my father, I just completely lost it. I was just bawling. The fact that my grandfather, who would pick me up from school all the time. I mean, my dad raised me as a single dad, so he was working, while I was at school and whatnot. Before school, he would even make me, the best tasting chocolate chip pancakes out there, and take me wherever I wanted to go. And he had no idea who I was. My father proceeded to tell me about a story just because he was just trying to relate. I mean, he knew how much that hurt. And my father told me about a particular instance where my grandfather, got up. He started to get, spooked. And my aunt and my father actually had to tie him to a chair and try to just talk to him, because he tried fighting them just to get away. And that was, kind of the starting point. We were talking about, having to put him into a nursing home, because my father, again, he's battling stage 4 prostate cancer with that metastasized in different parts of the body. And then my aunt, she's older at this point. I think she was in her 70s at this point. And so, it's way too much for both of them to handle. And then the hours that I was working in the auto industry, I couldn't be there all the time. Yeah, that just absolutely shattered me. See, stimulants too, another fun fact, stimulants are known to kind of blunt negative emotions. With cocaine, you got a lot of just powerful, positive, energy coming your way, like you want to run through walls, stuff like that. It just cut right through that. But I remember that one day in particular, just like it happened yesterday. It was July 8th. I got the call while I was at work. I was actually showing a client a new vehicle, and I got that call, and that call was like, you need to get here now. And I remember just immediately just hanging up the phone, got someone to help out my client, and I ran out of the store. I ran to my car, drove there as fast as I could, and I still missed him by 5 minutes. And that tore me up. That took a long time for me to, actually accept and come to terms with, and you'll see exactly how later. I, was starting to get in my own head, and I would spiral, and I'd be like, well, what if I ran faster? What if I drove faster? What if I was just, taking, the entire day off instead, just this stupid, unrealistic stuff that I couldn't control. I missed him. And that's that. He taught me patience. He taught me how to treat people right. Whenever he would see me struggling to do something, homework, just a chore or something like that, he would always come around and tell me sometimes the impossible takes just a little bit longer. So having him go was a real kick in the pants. But that phrase is something that I kept with me to this day. Right around the time that my grandfather passed, I actually stumbled upon this article discussing the mental health benefits of psychedelics. And it absolutely grabbed my attention. Because by this point, I had done LSD and mushrooms quite a few times, just for shits and giggles. But I never thought I would actually be using them as a tool. We're going to kind of break away from the main story a little bit, because I want to go into the science behind psychedelics. Basically, psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, DMT, the science behind it is absolutely mind-blowing. These substances work by basically interacting with the serotonin receptors in your brain, and that sparks a series of events that help you kind of dig deep to tackle all of those traumas so you can face them and learn to move forward with them. You can even find relief from depression and anxiety. It's proven. I am living proof of it. Compared to alcohol, tobacco, or even weed, psychedelics are not addictive and actually far less harmful physically. But see, here's the thing. It's not about just taking something, sitting back, relaxing, and all of a sudden all the healing's just going to do itself and you don't have to contribute at all. No. That's definitely not how it works. Your goals, your intent going into the experience matter a shit ton. Your mindset, your setting, all play key parts onto how your trip is going to, or the outcome of your trip. If you don't have the right setting, intent, I mean, you're just kind of wasting the experience, you know? And then the actual trip itself, that's actually just the first step on it, right? So integration is also very important too. Reflecting on that experience, the lessons that you learned from that experience, and how you are going to take that and integrate that into your everyday life. See, we're taught that psychedelics will ruin our brains. It's gonna make us see flying pink elephants. It's gonna make us jump out of second-story windows. If you just try it once, you're gonna be absolutely crazy for the rest of your life.
Some forget what height means, and in a turned-on or euphoric state, step or attempt to fly from cliffs and high windows with real-life, permanent, non-psychedelic results. Other trippers attempt to merge their being with large, fast automobiles.
And it couldn't be further from the truth. It's all bullshit. But I'm not a doctor, therapist, or medical professional. I'm just an engineering school and IT school dropout. If you're thinking about using psychedelics for your mental health, consult with a medical professional who is in the know. But good luck with finding it, because Western medicine is extremely slow to catch up to stuff like this. It's crazy how much anti-drug propaganda we were fed just due to the Nixon administration's war on the hippies.
As we see it from a typical psychiatric ward, LSD is certainly much more than a mere fad. Right now we have over a dozen people hospitalized because of acute symptoms resulting directly from their taking LSD. Bizarre fatal accidents and suicides have also occurred in LSD's users. Because of this, we say that LSD is not just a fad. People are seriously disturbed, some even dead. Some people have a bad experience the first time they take the drug. Others take it 30, 60, or even 100 times before their bad trip. And the bad trip? Instant insanity, often a never-never land of no return.
Don't tell me. No, get away. Get away. Get away. Get away.
That whole counterculture movement. They basically weaponized fear, targeting the counterculture and demonizing psychedelics. But again, it's all bullshit. The science doesn't support it. There was actually a groundbreaking study that came out from The Lancet, and it basically said that alcohol was the #1 most harmful drug, not just to yourself, but also to society. And that's above heroin. Wild. Yet, when you actually look at the bottom end of the graph, you'll see all the psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin. You'll even have MDMA on there too. Yet, thanks to decades of misinformation, psychedelics are still stigmatized. You still tell someone that you took a psychedelic, they think that you're some crazy drug addict who belongs in a padded cell.
Well, I'm terribly frightened by the problem of LSD. There is nothing smart, there is nothing grown up or sophisticated in taking an LSD trip at all. They're just being complete fools. Anyone that would engage in this or indulge in this is just a plain fool.
It's time to absolutely change that stigma. It's time to challenge those outdated perspectives and look at the actual data behind these substances, not the propaganda.
It is playing Russian roulette.
It's up to you. It's your brain, your chromosomes. It's your life.
Two organizations that have been very important in reshaping the narrative around psychedelics are the Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Conscious Research and the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, also known as MAPS. Much easier to pronounce, just MAPS. Johns Hopkins has actually been basically leading groundbreaking studies on psilocybin's potential to treat depression. That's kind of like part of that first article that I stumbled across, and that potential is to treat depression, anxiety, addiction, and they basically offer hard scientific evidence for its therapeutic benefits. MAPS, on the other hand, has been leading the charge in MDMA-assisted therapy. They're trying to legalize it for PTSD, and that's basically providing hope for a lot of individuals, law enforcement, just first responders in general. veterans, especially veterans. It's very important that we support these organizations because it's going to be very important in shaping how the future of mental health is looked at in this country. Now, I also want to note here that before I was trying any sort of substance or introducing that into my body, I would take probably about 2 to 3 weeks just to actually in-depth like research harm reduction, side effects, interactions, things like that. Hell, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it safe, or as safe as you can, I guess. My first LSD experience was actually 2 tabs. Now, when it comes to LSD, it's very important to note that it's not the dosage is not based off of the pure number of tabs. Because a tab can have a different dosage on it. So I was basically taking 300 micrograms of LSD because, you know what, if you're going to jump into the water, you might as well jump in with both feet. And it was an absolute blast. Music sounded completely different. Certain foods, especially fruit, tasted absolutely fantastic. But that actually wasn't my first psychedelic experience. My first one was actually with magic mushroom, psilocybin mushroom. It was just a regular dose, just an eighth. I was with a couple friends, and we were watching Austin Powers Goldmember. It's a great movie to watch while you're tripping.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
All the colors. The reason why I took mushrooms instead of LSD for my first psychedelic experience was mainly just for the duration. If I was going to spiral, have a bad reaction to it, or whatever, I would much rather have that happen in the duration that mushrooms last versus the duration that LSD lasts. And so by the end of 2019, I had done MDMA, 2CB, cocaine, ecstasy, Ecstasy X, MDMA, kind of the same thing, but the actual X, like the pills, actually have like different ingredients in there, so I'm not really going to categorize that in the same thing with MDMA. But yeah, so LSD, psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca, meth from the first time I was meth bombed, so I'm going to count that. Adderall, Vyvanse, plus weed and alcohol sprinkled in a little bit. I also tried various combos like Jedi Flippin', where you mix MDMA with LSD with mushrooms, except I was stupid and did a full dose of each one instead of actually just a third, and a third. Yeah, that was a wild ride. But again, I was being very reckless, careless. I was spiraling. At that point, I really didn't care. It was not a good route that I was on. Now, I never really got into opiates because I have a natural tolerance to it. Now we're going to have a little history class. Ayahuasca is a centuries-old brew. Basically consists of stems of vines from one plant and then leaves from another. Basically brew it into a tea, drink it, and holy shit, buckle up because you're about to have an experience. Indigenous people have been using it for centuries. They use it to heal and reconnect, with their ancestors, heal their spirit. And that's exactly what it did for me. LSD, that was synthesized, I believe it was 1938 by Albert Hofmann. And it basically made its debut in the counterculture. The 60s, anti-war movements, Hendrix, the best music in the world came from artists who were under the influence of psychedelics. I mean, and mushrooms have been around for just as long, if not longer, than ayahuasca. Almost every culture all over the world has some sort of psilocybin use in their history somewhere, at least from what I've found. So now, these next 2 ayahuasca experiences that I'm going to be talking about basically sound like it's going to be coming from someone who belongs in a padded cell. Every time I talk about it, I even start to, kind of think like, holy fuck, dude, are you nuts? This is the exact experiences, how I remember them. Whether you believe me or not, that's fine. If I were you, I'd probably think I was batshit too. It wasn't long after my grandfather died that I actually had my first ayahuasca experience. And that's what basically turned me from a complete, I guess you would classify me as an atheist then, to a complete omnist now. And I basically now believe that all of these, core religions stemmed from one main source older than we can ever fathom. And it's not a casual, just for fun drug. It's definitely something that should be respected. All psychedelics and all drugs should be respected. It's a serious medicine known to help with trauma. It's been shown to help with cocaine addiction.
Creemos que la ayahuasca puede tener un efecto antidepresivo y que podría ser útil en el tratamiento de depresiones que no responden a ningún otro tratamiento convencional. En segundo lugar, no es una sustancia que genere adicción y por el contrario creemos que su administración podría ayudar a personas que tienen adicciones a sustancias como alcohol, heroína, cocaína, a abandonar estos consumos.
In fact, actually, each time that I did it, my cocaine use dropped a little bit, but I wasn't taking it with that intent. But I did notice that there was a moment where there was a decline in that use. Usually people take ayahuasca in that brew tea form that I was mentioning earlier.
To be healed, and we give it to them.
I'd come home from Afghanistan with PTSD.
My depression started when I was a teenager.
I'm a drug addict.
I was date raped.
Bipolar disorder.
Complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
My sex addiction. Opiate addiction.
An alcoholic for sure.
Except I had a different form. Because I wasn't about to, going about making tea in the kitchen with, vines and leaves and all that. So I had a capsule version. It was 2 pills, one to prep your stomach, because if you didn't, your stomach would basically break down all the DMT that's in the ayahuasca. That's in that second pill. So after about, I believe it was like 20-30 minutes, popped the second one and then sat down and enjoyed the ride. Now, I had a garbage can next to me because there's a part of the process that's associated with purging. You just throw up. A lot of the people associate it with purging up the negative energy, all that trauma. I was ready to rock and roll with my little puke bucket ready and handy. And then it started hitting me. I started seeing like my reality was completely disappearing. I was not in the room that I was in anymore. I was basically kind of like in this black void. I saw myself, and now keep in mind this is all like third person perspective for what I'm talking about. So I saw myself in a third person perspective floating in like this black abyss, and I saw this like kind of tarnished, dirty white like orb kind of come out of my chest and fly off into the distance, into this black void. I started seeing these beautiful this beautiful mask being traced out in front of me in these lines. It was like a beautiful sterling silver and gold outline being traced. I just remember thinking that it was the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen. And it was at that moment that I realized that I was face to face with Mother Ayahuasca. Now again, you're probably going to think I'm crazy, but this is just how the experience was. Mother Ayahuasca is the, I guess you would say, deity spirit that you encounter when you're on this particular journey. And she kind of helps guide you through the trauma, or at least that's what she did with me.
It's strange. I feel like the same person, but today I feel so much lighter.
Ayahuasca saved my life, honestly.
Once they drink that cup, there is no turning back.
So she basically was telling me in kind of like a telepathic type manner, I guess, things are okay. And I was getting very anxious, because again, this is an intense experience. This is not something that, you just kind of just jump into without serious thought. And then eventually she took me to this kind of like this, you could kind of visualize it as like someone was describing heaven, kind of like this kind of white fog, like these kind of like clouds type setting. And I saw myself as like a little kid, again, third person perspective, saw myself as a little kid. Everything from the waist down was like this glowing white, like fog. Again, think like kind of like a ghost or a phantom type thing. I was kind of like, see-through, very hazy, foggy. And then out of nowhere around me, kind of like in this half circle, I saw all my relatives, my immediate family that passed away, uncles, aunts, including an aunt that I never even met, my grandmother who passed away before I was born, and I saw my grandfather there too. I was just overwhelmed with the sense of calm and peace. It's something, it's weird to kind of describe because I'm definitely not doing it any sort of justice. It's one of those things you kind of have to experience. And I was kind of getting like this message sent to me from all of them. They were really proud of myself and my father for still pushing along, more specifically my father. Somehow I got this notion or this message that I had to send a message to my father that everything was going to be okay and to keep fighting. I don't know, it's just hard to explain. The real experience was when they all hugged me. And I saw all of them just come around me and just hug my child self. And I just felt at that moment of contact, I had this overwhelming just deluge of love. For that brief moment, I felt like, yeah, everything was gonna be okay. That it's one thing, because I always told myself, like, yeah, okay, things are gonna be good, but it's one thing to have that drilled into your soul and to actually, start believing that everything was okay. And that was that moment. It was beautiful. And I returned back to that scene where my body was floating in space, and I saw from these fractals that were just glowing in the distance, this orb, this beautiful, beautiful, glimmering, shiny, pearl white just orb. It was so beautiful, and it just returned right back into my chest, into my body. And after it came back into my body, I started feeling like I had a deeper connection with something beyond our understanding. At one point in that experience, towards after that hugging scene, there was a particular instance where I could literally feel like energy radiating from the ground, and I was getting these thoughts that the planet's so alive, like it actually is this one giant living thing, and I was feeling this energy, and I felt so connected to nature, and I just felt so connected to just everything. That single experience gave me peace about my grandfather's passing. I no longer beat myself up about that whole missing him by 5 minutes thing. As a side effect, completely killed my hookah habit. After that, I just stopped. So now we're in November 2019, and my dad hits me out of the blue. Hey, can I have a tab of acid? I'm just like, what the fuck? Well, it turned out he actually was listening to me when I was telling him about these antidepressant studies and whatnot. His antidepressants that he was prescribed weren't doing the trick. It was very obvious that they weren't. I gave it a lot of thought because he did have a lot going on with him. He had nephrostomy tubes, an ostomy bag, and he also had cancer and a microfracture in his low lumbar. There was definitely a lot that I had to consider, because this could have easily gone in a bad direction. I had the opportunity to consult with one of his doctors, and I asked him if someone in my father's position could benefit from psychedelic assisted therapy. I mean, he knew what I was asking. He said, because he worked for the VA, he said, I can't tell you one way or the other, but in a hypothetical scenario, if there were a patient with similar conditions as your father, they would benefit significantly from psychedelic assisted therapy. And that was the green light. I knew we were good to go. We waited a while to actually do it. It wasn't until after the lockdowns that we had that experience, so I'll get to that shortly. When the lockdowns started, I was absolutely terrified. I mean, this was the beginning of COVID. We had no idea how bad this was actually going to be. Initial estimates saying that millions and millions of people were going to die. Everyone was going to die, whatever. I was absolutely terrified because he was currently in chemo, so his immune system was completely shot. And we had learned at the beginning of 2020, around January, February, that the cancer finally spread to his brain. So we knew at that point, actually we knew for a while that, he wasn't going to make it. It was just more of a when type of thing. But this let us know it was going to be sooner rather than later. And when I heard that, in combination of this new virus that was coming out, I was freaking. I had to make this decision of, do I have to quit my job to take care of my father? Is there some way that one of my other relatives can kind of help out or whatever? And I was very thankful and fortunate that my bosses at the job that I was at the time, they were extremely understanding about the situation. They let me take a temporary leave of absence. They told me that, yeah, for sure, when things are concluded, you're more than welcome to come back. My father's cancer originated in his prostate. He was actually exposed to toxic water contamination at Camp Lejeune when he was in the Marine Corps back in the day, and it had spread to various parts in his body. I know for sure a microfracture in his spine and his brain. I forget if it was his liver or his kidneys, but it definitely spread to one of those two as well. It spread to a lot of places. And my father had an ostomy bag and nephrostomy tubes. I'm not going to go into detail as to what they are. You can look them up on your own. Good luck. He had been fighting in cancer at this point for 10 and a half, almost 11 years, before he passed. Now, when all the lockdowns started, that's when it was a perfect opportunity for him and I to have that psychedelic experience together. In fact, it was one of the best, last father-son moments that we had together before he passed. And I'm actually extremely grateful that I had the opportunity to give that experience to him, and you're about to hear why. Basically, after he took the tab and it started setting in, I had a nice put together playlist on Spotify with calming music, put an eye mask on him, and I had him lay down. I just just saw the process unfold. The last time I saw him smile that much was before he was actually diagnosed. After he was done with that meditation for the remainder of the trip, we basically just kicked back and joked around, played with my dog, my cats, and then just watched a couple movies until, it was eventually, time to call it a night. I did ask him the next day how his experience was and what he thought, and he had nothing but glowing things to say about it. In fact, he actually didn't even need his antidepressants ever again after that. And now it's not like I just took it, hit it, and said, no, you're not taking these ever again. I asked him, because I was in charge of administering his medications and whatnot, so I would ask him, hey, how are you feeling? Do you feel like, you want your antidepressant today? And he, every day, no, I don't need it anymore. And that was the most beautiful thing. I actually still have his bottle of antidepressants as a trophy for what I was able to provide to him. And it was one of the most fulfilling things I could have given to him outside of just being his caregiver. A few weeks later, it was very clear that he couldn't be left alone. My aunt had let me know a couple times that he had fallen. He was, following a similar progression about forgetting things. Again, he's living in my grandfather's place, so he was in charge of kind of packing up all of this leftover belongings from my grandfather, and then my aunt who also lived there. She passed away in 2015. They basically, just to give you a kind of a mental image as to how much shit there was in this house, my family would buy and sell at garage sales and flea markets starting from the 60s. So they had decades of accumulated stuff, and eventually it got to the point where my grandfather was bringing in more than he was letting go. That just took a very long time to organize, sift through, package up, and then relocate. And in my father's state, he was not able to do that anymore. He would continue to try to push himself. At that point, my now ex and I were talking and spitballing ideas as to how we can find a solution to this. Really, the only solution was that I had to move out of my home to move in with him. She would watch my place and my pets, make sure everything was good on this end. I would basically live temporarily at my grandfather's old home. And not only would I have the responsibility of being a caregiver, I also had to be a mover because someone had to pack up all the rest of that stuff. And there was a full basement, garage, attic. It's insane how much stuff there was. Now, I also want to add that the house still had a mortgage payment on it that we couldn't afford. So there was a time clock as to when that house was going to go into foreclosure. Now, one of the things that was working in our favor was that during COVID, they had, those laws in place, or those, temporary rules in place or whatever, about, foreclosures and whatnot. So definitely, again, worked in our favor, bought me a little bit of time, especially with the fact that there is no exact expiration date, when someone's going to pass away. So stressing over his health, the move, and then everything going on with COVID. Keep in mind, I was one of those people that coming back from the grocery store, I was wiping down the bags with sanitizer, anything that wasn't like organic or whatever, boxed up, I was wiping down with sanitizer. It was ridiculous, but I knew it was absolutely necessary for making sure he was safe. My drug use was getting so bad, I was taking LSD every other day, would take MDMA here and there, mushrooms, again, here and there throughout the week, weed definitely, and then I would burn through my Adderall prescription in half the time, so I would go through 30 days worth in 15 days, and I would keep in mind, I was prescribed 60 milligrams a day, so it was definitely excessive. And then with the cocaine, my dealer would deliver to me. Now, I also want to make this very clear, because I'm sure there might be one or two watching this that are going to think like, wow, he was so drugged up, could he even take care of his dad at that point? Was he providing just shit care and ignoring his dad? My father's care came first and foremost, and I really wish I could describe it. Anytime that there was a medical instance, medical emergency or whatever that happened with my father, it was like I could just snap out and completely just snap back into reality for however long that was required. I don't want to say it completely killed off any effects of whatever I was under the influence of, but it was definitely minimized significantly. And then when it came to the LSD, I also had a significant tolerance buildup, so I wasn't taking more each time every other day. It was the same dosage, so the effects were also very diminished too. So I wasn't completely out of it. One of the main reasons that I enjoyed LSD is mainly just music. If you know, you know. One time I remember I actually had to bandage up my father's nephrostomy tubes, and I was, tripping at the time. I knew I did a good job. I wasn't worried. The next day he went to his doctor's appointment, and the doctor asked him if I had any sort of nursing experience because of how well it was all bandaged up. So just painting the picture for you guys. I had previous training in first aid too from when I was way younger. My father made it very, very clear that I needed to know certain skills in life, and first aid, cooking, those were probably one of the top, or some of the top two. And then also when it came to things like bandaging up his nephrostomy tubes and the ostomy bag, since his health had been declining for so long, I've had that entire time, even from before I started using, to get kind of like those caregiving routines kind of like memorized and kind of like ingrained in me, so that way they came to me like that. And then eventually that day came. It was May 28th, 2020, and my father didn't wake up. It felt like just a normal day. Got up at the same time, running off of an average of 3-4 hours of sleep a night. Went to his bedroom to go wake him up. Dad, it's time to get up. Nothing. Kept nudging him a little bit. Nothing. I knew that was going to be the day. So as I was calling some immediate relatives and, kind of preparing for things to finally come to a close, everything that was just going on outside of that house just didn't exist. The country was completely falling apart. Everyone was just bickering with each other all the time, back and forth, all about the politics and everything, all the societal changes. Things outside of that house didn't exist that day. Whenever someone was speaking to me, I would, for the most part, kind of have to ask them to repeat themselves because it just sounded like noise. I couldn't focus on anything other than the fact that my father was going to die that day. The thing that really sucked is that he made a lot of life changes after his diagnosis. We started becoming really, really close during that time in the past 5 years that he was alive. I finally got my father as like a best friend, and the universe just ripped him away from me. Eventually that reality shrank because I was no longer in different parts of the house. I just stayed by my father's side in that room for the rest of the day. It was like just darkness and black outside the windows, outside that room. And that evening, he drew his last breath, and it was the most agonizing, painful experience that I've ever felt and probably will ever feel. It was like a red hot dagger that just pierced my chest, just twisting and ripping just everything just inside of my chest. Tearing sensations with fire. I barely spoke to anyone that entire day or night. The only thing that was running through my head were times that I wished I spent with my father instead of doing things that I wanted to do. Pictures that I wish I had taken. Moments in my life that he'll never experience. He'll never see me get married. He's never going to see the future grandchild. He's gone. At least in person, he's gone. I know he's always with me. If you lost a parent, you know it's definitely not the same. I knew that I needed to have another conversation with Mother Ayahuasca after that moment. I needed to make sure that he got to where he needed to go. I needed to make sure that he was with the rest of the family. I'm sure as you hear this, you're like, what the fuck, dude? Literally, right after your dad died? Are you fucking kidding me right now? And yeah, I definitely had that conflicting conversation in my head. Is it way too soon? Should I wait a little bit? But ultimately, the reason why I decided to do it the day after he died is because I knew had I waited, my ego, just the way that I was gonna just build up these walls instead of addressing the actual problem. And by the time I would work myself up to the point to take it, it would just have to do so much work just breaking through all those barriers. So I wanted to get it while it was still raw and fresh. Next day, grab my bottles of water, grab my puke bucket, pop my 2 capsules, and away I go. It was a mistake on my end to assume that this experience was going to be almost exactly like, the one that I had after my grandfather passed. Those of you that have used psychedelics know that there are no 2 trips that are really the same, especially when it comes to something like ayahuasca or DMT. This time I felt nauseous way earlier than before. I was prepared though. I had my little garbage can, so I had it handy, ready to go. As I feel it come up, all of a sudden, it feels like something's stopping it. Now, I wasn't trying to hold it in or anything. I'm like, all right, let's fucking roll. Let's get this negative energy out of here. And no, I just couldn't throw up at all. It was weird. And eventually that nausea just completely went away altogether. Like it was just completely removed from me without needing to actually vomit it up. Either that or my stomach calmed down. One of the two. Eventually that nausea went away and I was traveling towards this, I guess some people would describe it, the light at the end of the tunnel. And it was basically this cluster of light fragments, all different colors, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I started feeling that similar, like I was in that similar places before, you know, where I felt like everything was going to be okay, the love, the acceptance that was all like kind of hitting, but I wasn't seeing any of my relatives like I did in the first trip. What's going on? This isn't the same. I was expecting to see my family get that hug of acceptance and we're good to go. But no, that's definitely not what happened. Instead, I actually had something way more beautiful happen. Now again, you're gonna think I'm crazy, padded cell, batshit, whatever. Again, this is just the experience that happened. I was laying down and it felt like I was no longer in control of my own body. I went to go reach for some water and just my arm wasn't registering the movement. I'm like, what the fuck? And then I started kind of getting a little concerned because I'm like, all right, hold on. I never really read anything about loss of like limb usage or anything like that. What the fuck's going on? All of a sudden my arm moved and reached for my phone and I started putting on music that I didn't know the actual like names of. I mean, I recognized the songs from when I was a kid, but I never knew the names of them. Again, I was trying to register movements like I wasn't in control. And then next thing I know, I go to just lay back and my father had this position that he would just lay down in and he would just cross his arms over the back of his head and kind of like cross one ankle over the other and just kind of lay back. I always found that position extremely uncomfortable. I never sat like that. Hate it, don't like it. And I found myself defaulting back in that position every time I went to, you know, get some water or, you know, a new song was being thrown on. And again, now keep in mind, throughout 90% of this, I was not in control of my body. I started regaining control towards like the tail end. You know, as music's playing, I just all of a sudden just jumped out of bed and I started, it felt like I was experiencing movement for the first time. I was experiencing my body, like, you know, just how it just interacted with just reality for the very first time. It was really weird. As the trip progressed, I noticed that my body was mimicking movements similar to, you know, how my father's movements were towards just before he was passing, since the cancer was in his brain. So there were times where he would go to drink some water and he would just lose control and it would just fall and spill water everywhere. And then he was sitting so much that he was eventually just walking over in this hunchback position all the time. I started doing just those things. I went to go drink some water and then it scared me because this is not shit that I read about, you know, that the experience, you know, contained. I'm like kind of tweaking, you know, I'm dropping, you know, water and I'm walking all weird. And I'm just like, all right, we just need to go lay back down and we're good. I go lay back down and then wilder shit even fucking happened. I go to pick up my phone and I'm calling my aunt and my brain is just like, are you stupid? You are very, very high right now. What are you doing? Now, my aunt knew that I was going to be doing this experience. I mean, she doesn't really know much about it or what it, you know, contains, but she knew that I was going to be occupied for that day. Next thing I know, phone's ringing. As soon as she picked up, it felt like my consciousness was jutted out of my body. I was just in darkness. I could hear that there was some sort of conversation going on, but no words. I couldn't make out what the actual conversation was. I heard my aunt on the other end, like just muffled, like, wah, 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 wah. I don't remember that conversation, how that went, and I wasn't there for it. Again, as I say it, I'm just like, what the fuck? But then after that call ended, boom, right back in my body. Basically something said, get the fuck out. I'll let you know when I'm done borrowing this, and then you can come back and have it again. And I came back from that out-of-body experience kind of just the rest of the night just processing what the fuck just happened. It was a trip that I experienced like none other than before, and I don't know if I'll ever have an experience like that again, but I'm super blessed and grateful to have had that experience because for a brief moment, it felt like I had that missing piece that left when my father died. It felt like I had that missing piece back with me. Then when it ended, I felt that piece of me leave again, and somehow I knew I would never have that back. But realizing my father got to where he needed to go and that he's with the rest of the family, it brought me so much closure. And I know I wouldn't have gotten this closure had I waited. Unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions at the time, we were only allowed to have 10 people in the cemetery, and I wasn't even allowed to stand next to my father's gravesite. Within a month and a half of that, I was back at work, first time ever having downtime, and I finally had time to actually process or start to process everything that was going on. Because even after he passed, I was still dealing with, doing all the funeral arrangements, still packing up the house, and then I get back to work and it's just a slow day and all of it just hits me like a ton of bricks. And in fact, I actually had to take the next 2 days off just because how much of a mess I was in my head. I was so anxiety ridden, I was shaking, I just couldn't focus on anything. My mind was just racing on all these random different things. I felt like I was locked in my head, like I was a prisoner inside of my own mind. Yeah, I wanted to do, basic things like cooking or doing the laundry, but it felt like such a monumental task. Every time I would go to get out of bed, my body just wouldn't register the movement. There are days that I woke up wishing that I didn't. There were many times where I wish something external would happen to me that would take me out. One of the big things that I was struggling with was the survivor's guilt. My father, he volunteered in the community throughout his entire life, even while he was sick. He was a soccer coach, all while being a dad on top of it. How could something like this happen to a guy like that? Someone who went out of his way to help people, did all of this community service. He didn't deserve to die that way. And if something like that can happen to someone so good like him, what the fuck's gonna happen to me? Eventually, when I got back to work after those 2 days off, I just had to force myself through the day, except I was letting my anxieties get the best of me. And still dealing with the addiction. I was avoiding customers or I was cutting conversations short. I had zero focus on trying to, sell cars. I just didn't even know whether I wanted to be alive anymore or not. Now keep in mind, being in sales, you kind of have to be on your mental A game if you are going to get ahead of everyone else. Or just do good in general. But I was melting down inside. Yeah, the ayahuasca trip really helped bring me a lot of closure and helped me heal a lot from my father's passing, but there were still many other aspects of my life that I was not improving. I was still eating unhealthy my entire life, except for a small little stint in grade school. I mean, when I was playing soccer, all my life I was living this, kind of couch potato life, playing video games all the time, no sports, no nothing. Things started deteriorating between my ex and I. It just led to constant arguments. I developed really bad anger issues, and whenever we would get into a heated argument, I would just punch a wall or I would throw something at the wall. Just be an argument about something stupid. I would just get heated out of nowhere. And now I never thought about laying a finger on her or causing her any harm. It was all inanimate objects and just punching the wall. My vision would become so narrow, I guess. I would kind of get this tunnel vision. Everything had a red tint to it. And I felt like I was someone else completely. It was a terrible time. Yeah, I mean, I definitely made my mistakes. We both contributed to everything just blowing up. I ended up getting let go from my job, the one that I was so proud of. How could I let myself reach this point? Get to this low? I felt like the biggest failure, like I was just going to be nothing but just a stupid degenerate. I was absolutely disgusted with the person that I became. And then after that, things with my ex got even worse. During one argument that her and I had, things just got really heated and I ended up just going into the bathroom, locking myself in, and I just started taking a knife and just cutting my forearm, and I started just taking everything out of myself, everything that happened. I blamed myself for absolutely everything. Things deteriorating between my ex and I, even though it was both of us contributing to that. I blamed myself for not being able to save my father, because, I mean, yeah, I could have saved someone from cancer. What? No. But I was just so lost, and I was just in this such dark place. She was banging on the door. She called my two brothers, two best friends, my brothers, over, and they came over right away. And eventually I just snapped back into reality, and I just ended up patching myself up. Probably should have gotten a couple stitches. I told everyone that I actually ended up cutting my arm with a box cutter. Life was so dark. There was hardly a positive thought in my mind at all. Eventually, I started, just realizing more and more that I was just more unhealthy. I just started getting more and more disgusted with myself. I basically wanted it all to end because the thought of doing just even the most basic tasks seemed so monumental. And I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't see a positive ending to this story. And also, too, keep in mind with ADHD, it covers a blanket of things. One of those things being depression. That definitely wasn't contributing to that situation. I ended up stumbling across the famous late great Terrence McKenna. His protocol was basically you take 5 grams of mushrooms, lock yourself in a dark room, no light, no sound, no nothing, just completely isolated, just you, yourself, your thoughts. I was like, you know what? I need this. I need that experience. I need to do something that is going to give me that kick in the ass to get me in that direction. Instead of doing 5 grams, I ended up doing 7 grams because, you know what? Fuck it. We're just going to go with the nuclear option and just nuke the brain. I've done way more than 7 grams of mushrooms before, but again, with the intent, you can have a smaller dose give you a life-changing experience compared to something that's double that dose. What I got out of the 7 grams was more than any other mushroom trip that I ever had. So I ingested the 7 grams of mushrooms and locked myself in a dark room, no light. I put headphones on with nothing playing just to cancel out any exterior, noise, and laid down on the floor, just stayed there in place, meditating for a solid, I want to, no less than 3 hours, but I do want to say it was probably around 4 hours of just straight meditation. Hard to remember the exact time, but yeah, no less than 3 hours. That was the start of my life, I would like to say. That's kind of like my rebirth during this experience. I started reflecting on many of my relatives who had passed away from various health reasons that I feel could have been severely either mitigated or avoided completely had they, done proper, exercise, practiced proper dieting. I realized more like I truly accepted that I was actually on that same path. I was eating the same shit. I would literally go to the grocery store, grab a thing of the family size of Chips Ahoy, and within 3 days, a sleeve a day would just demolish that entire package. It was so bad. This time it was hammered into me. This is going to happen to you if you keep going this route. So the next day I signed up for a Planet Fitness membership, and then my health and wellness journey kicked off from there. Now I'm going to make a separate video about the whole health and wellness journey because that's going to tie into what's going on with my back, those back issues. This video is just mainly how psychedelics changed my life for the better. The ayahuasca experience really helped with me coping with my grandfather and my father passing. And then the mushroom trip completely turned me onto a lifestyle that I will forever hold with me. I now practice proper dieting. I try, obviously with my back issue, I try to exercise to a degree. I went from being a complete asshole to being someone that people wanted to actually, be around. And I did lose a lot of friendships in this, journey, and I accept the, consequences of those actions, and I do apologize for anyone that I did hurt during that experience. I became a more kind, understanding, and empathetic human being. I now carry the belief that we are all connected to each other. I started working out, I started eating right, I saw results. I had that drive to learn more about, my mental and physical. I no longer have days where I wish I didn't wake up. I no longer express my anger by punching a hole in the wall or throwing some sort of inanimate object. I know my body now more than ever. My relationships, the ones that did stick around, they improved. My spirituality, like I mentioned earlier, was completely reignited. And then March of 2021, actually a little bit before that mushroom trip, is when I decided to stop doing, cocaine and Adderall. Stopped abusing it completely. Cold turkey, both at the same time. I feel at peace with how everything unfolded during these past few years. And now a lot of people might be really skeptical about the results of this.
Lots of people drink coffee before they go to work, of course. Others, believe it or not, drop acid.
Now, why some psychiatrists and researchers are giving psychedelic drugs a second look as a possible way of treating depression and some mental illnesses.
They're being used to treat depression, anxiety, and addiction. The early results are impressive.
They're relatively non-toxic, less toxic than alcohol. They're non-addictive.
The DEA says it's granted permission to more than 50 researchers to study the therapeutic effects of LSD.
Denver has become the first city in America to decriminalize
psychedelic mushrooms.
The city of Oakland is now the second city in the U.S. to decriminalize the adult use and possession of magic mushrooms.
The Santa Cruz City Council unanimously approved the resolution. This decriminalizes the use, possession, and cultivation of psychoactive plants.
And I don't blame you. At first, when I first read it, I didn't really believe it either, but I'm living proof that it works. I also don't need to constantly do it over and over again in order to maintain those healthy habits. And that's the beautiful thing about this, is that you can have a life-changing experience and you don't need to keep going back to it over and over again. There's always more work to be done, and I'm constantly trying every day to be better than the person I was yesterday. As cliche as that sounds, that's just how I live life now. What ties all of these experiences together is their ability to connect you with something bigger, whether that's healing trauma, breaking destructive cycles, or gaining, profound life-changing insights. But I just want to make this clear. Psychedelics, drugs in general, they're not just something that you just casually do. It's something that needs to be respected, understood. They're tools, not toys. Whether it's your first trip with mushrooms or you're on a guided ayahuasca experience, these substances can change your life, but they're only going to change your life if you're ready to meet them halfway. As I wrap up this story, I want to leave you with one thought. Life is messy, chaotic, and so many times unfair, but within that chaos lies the potential for growth, healing, and massive transformation. Psychedelics were a tool that helped me peel back the layers of pain, addiction, and self-doubt to discover, or I should say rediscover, a version of myself that I thought was long gone and that I would never get back again. They weren't a magic pill or an easy fix, but nothing ever is. They offered me a chance to see the world and myself through a lens of clarity. Whether you're here out of curiosity or looking for answers, I hope there's some part of my journey that resonates with you and inspires you to approach your own life with courage, introspection, and open-mindedness. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to the next video. Let's keep getting it together.